Welcome to the Support Automation Show, a podcast by Capacity. Join us for conversations with leaders in customer or employee support who are using technology to answer questions, automate processes, and build innovative solutions to any business challenge. I'm your host, Justin Schmidt.
Good morning, Emily. Where does this podcast find you today?
Hi, I am located in Napa, California.
I love the Bay Area, Napa, Central Northern California. Spent a few years up there and a while ago, and it's as beautiful as everybody says it is. So, Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself. You are currently the AVP of Customer Success at Fastly. So maybe give us some bit of your background and how you got into customer success.
Sure. So I started my career at AT&T, and I did a variety of customer-facing roles. So sales, account management, business development, and through multiple moves, ended up in the Bay Area. For anyone who has moved to the Bay Area, you might relate with me here. I started to feel like the pull of startup, right? The startup allure. It's real, it's exciting, and it was just time to try something new. So started to look at what the options were and ended up moving over to Fastly. So I started the sales enablement function there. That was my first role and really liked interacting with the sales team. I got to do coaching, roll out a whole sales methodology. I was some people don't think it's so fun. I actually really enjoyed preparing all the RFP responses, all kind of that sales support sort of function. And then about a year and a half in, I was in a conversation and just realized how much I missed actually talking to customers. And that was really the prompt for me of, all right, I've got to pivot. And around that same time, we were looking at starting more of a post-sales focused team in customer success, and raised my hand and said, I'm interested in doing this. So I moved over into that role initially as a player coach to help build things out, and have since been able to grow and expand the team. We're now about 30 people globally.
That's amazing. And for those of us in the audience that don't know what Fastly does, could you maybe give 90 seconds on Fastly?
Sure. So Fastly is an edge cloud delivery network. So we do content delivery and security. So my favorite example for content delivery is, think about if you were downloading an article from New York Times, right? You want to read what's in the news today. If New York Times has their content for the website, not just the articles, but how are the articles built, right? All the framework that goes into building a website. Say that's hosted on the East Coast, right? They can walk to it from their office. Great. If you're in New Jersey and you're pulling that up, it's pretty fast, right? New Jersey, New York are next to each other. But if you're a reader in the Bay Area, you're now going all the way across the country to request that article. Well, it doesn't take just one request to build the entire website and article, right? There's 150 back and forths. So now, because of the geography, you're actually introducing latency. So what Fastly does is we have local points of presence in various cities, kind of closer to end users. So content is actually cached there. So then rather than me in the Bay Area going all the way to New York, maybe I'm just going to San Francisco or San Jose, much faster loading experience. And then we layer security on top of that to make sure that websites stay secure.
Yeah, I love it. In a prior life, I was the VP of marketing and then ultimately the VP of publishing operations at a company called Multiply. We ran a whole series of websites. Answers.com is probably our biggest brand. And we are big Fastly customers. And, you and I just met a few minutes ago. So this is coming from a place of a real recommendation, not some sort of incentivized relationship here. Fastly is fantastic. So anyone that's dealing with sort of web traffic at scale, I can't say enough good things about the platform. So it's actually really fun to have you on, because in a lot of instances, I have these great conversations with support leaders, but my experience with their product is tertiary at best. But this is going to be fun for me, because as our conversation unfolds, maybe some of your anecdotes and stuff that you talk about, I'm going to think back to my time in publishing, when we very well could have been one of the customers that sparked maybe an anecdote you're going to share. But when I start this conversation with our guests, my first question is it's usually my favorite question of the whole show, just because the answers are always slightly different. And that is, when you hear the word support automation, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's similar to one of my favorite questions, which is, what does customer success mean? Because I think in both, it's wildly different company to company and even people's interpretation.
Yeah, let's do both. Do support automation and also like dovetail right into customer success, because I think this will be a great bed for the rest of our conversation.
Yeah, so I think support automation, the automation part is where the scariness comes in, right? I think for the most part, companies understand, we want to support our customers. Typically, there's, I'd say, a designated support team who's handling tickets and maybe some other aspects, but that's kind of the unifying piece across companies. But the automation part is, yes, we know we need a tool, but we also need humans, and finding that balance. And I think when people hear automation, it's, hey, we're either going to send all of our jobs offshore or we're going to bring in tools and not need humans. And I really think, especially I'll bucket it all under the umbrella of customer experience. It's really finding that balance between automation and human effort. I think one of the things I've seen firsthand at Fastly is just how valuable a support team can be and how that can be a differentiator for your company. Typically when someone's filing a ticket with you, they're not happy, right? Like the ticket's not, oh, I love your product. The ticket is, something's wrong, like, please help me fix it. And, the fact that we consistently have high CSAT scores, we have, you want to measure success on both sides, right? It's the customer experience, but it's also the internal experience. And the fact that we've, had people join this support team and stay with the company, grow and develop, I think it's a win on both sides. So I think support automation, it's how do we take care of our customers, but do it in the most efficient way. And I think in doing that, it's that balance between human and tooling. And then I'll transition to the customer success piece, because I think that's also interesting. And we were saying right before we started recording that, customer success means different things at different companies. And
it sure does.
It's, I think, similar to this idea of support, right? Yes, there's one team that has that title, but it really needs to be a philosophy across the entire company. And so I've seen, customer success be strictly the CSM team. Sometimes it incorporates everything post-sale, right? Whether that's support or professional services, customer training, all of those things really go into that customer journey. And as you think about the customer experience, how do we keep and grow the customer? How do we make sure that they're successful? And all of those pieces ultimately dovetail in whether or not you organizationally create it that way.
That's exactly right. There's a confluence of like revenue, product roadmap, direction, general direction of the company that all happens sort of in the customer relationship, right? And it's very easy, I think, to say, oh, well, when I think of the org chart, I've got like the sales team reports into the sales, marketing reports into marketing, customer reports into customer success or whatever it is. And product has their own. And we get together to share ideas, discuss, move things forward. But the fulcrum of that conversation is customer relationships and what happens with the customer as you're kind of going through the journey, right? So one thing that I'm particularly keen on asking you, just given the fact that you kind of started in sales enablement at Fastly and like grew that and, effectively parlayed that into the role you're at now, is that you've got a very unique point of view of both understanding the beginning of the customer journey and then also the deep into the bowels of the customer journey, stack there with customer experience and customer success and all that. How can customer support and customer experience, customer success teams, how can the customer side of the business work to ensure their voices are heard with some of the kind of top funnel beginning of the journey sides of the business?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think a constant journey. When we think about partnering at Fastly, and especially because our support team has been in place for a while, our customer success team in the grand scheme of the company, slightly newer. And so it was, how do we develop a team when there's already these existing teams that we now need to interact and support with. And I think it's being really clear on what is everyone's role, right? Especially if you're establishing a new team in the midst of other stuff that's working. Sometimes it's, hey, I'm going to take a piece of what was your role. And there's tons of change management work needing to be done around that, right? To make sure everyone understands why the changes are being made, but also be really focused on, okay, coming out of the cloud and through this change management, what does everyone's roles look like after? And are people really clear on what those mean? I think that's the first step, right? Just providing that clarity, because when you have that clarity, then you are actually able to hold people accountable, right?
Right.
People will still, skirt the rules or, maybe try and revert back to the way things were. It's comfortable, but you have the ability then to say, hey, wait, like we talked about this. Everyone was very clear on what it looked like moving forward. So I think a huge part of change management is just outlining, how are things going to be so that you can have some of those difficult conversations if needed.
Yeah.
And then I think it's figuring out, how do you want to partner, right? Starting a new team gives you a little bit of luxury of seeing what has worked and what hasn't worked and being able to learn from that. So one of the things that I was really conscious of is, how do we provide value to our customers? That's our number one focus. But right behind that is value internally. And so how do you make these interactions, and what can we do to better support teams? But then also, like, what do we need from those teams in order to be successful, right? It's not a one-way street. Sometimes the customer success and support teams can get treated as, hey, go deal with the stuff nobody else wants to,
Right.
which is not ideal, right? Nobody wants to be in fire drill mode all the time. So really seeing, how can I add value? And then what do I need in terms of expectation setting from other internal teams to make sure that this is going to be a good, seamless internal and external experience.
Yeah. You touched on something interesting there, and that is that I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit, but that there sometimes is this expectation that, like, the customer care part of an organization deals with a lot of problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one sort of phrase that comes to mind when I think about this is the concept of, like, shit rolls downhill, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's a terrible phrase to use in this instance, because customer support is not, or customer teams are not downhill from something else. This is a flat plane where all are equal. And second, like, you shouldn't ever characterize your customers as shit, right? But what's interesting here, though, is that, and this, again, this is like the voice of the customer is often carried through the customer care teams, right? And like customer success, and I can just speak to this from here at Capacity. We're a much smaller operation than someone like Fastly is, but we still have the same incentives on ensuring that our customers are successful, and especially the ones at the tip of the spear in terms of the scale of our platform inside their organization, the types of challenges that they're using, Capacity to solve, all that kind of stuff. And those conversations, those QBRs, those, implementation calls or whatever it is that the CS team is going through, the findings and the feedback from those are just absolutely invaluable, right? And they're invaluable to everyone from, the other customer care teams all the way through to the CEO and to the interns in the engineering department. And I love hearing you touch on the change management aspect of all of this, because change management, it's one of those, like, business bingo terms that it's like digital transformation. It's like, what does that really mean? But one part of change management, it's not only just like process design, job design, all the kind of stuff you learn in school, but it's also like bringing in technology and leveraging that technology through some of that change that you're trying to implement. Which leads me to another topic that we had proposed in our back and forth before this meeting, which is like tool evaluation and positioning automation with a team. Let's bundle those together, because I think, like, ultimately it's kind of the branches of the same tree. So positioning automation with the team and the evaluation of those tools. I assume you mentioned positioning automation because and you did kind of mention this earlier, that sometimes automation could, for those of us on audio, I'm making scare quotes, it can be scary. Can you speak a little bit about how to effectively position automation within a team and manage the change management that comes with that?
Sure. I think a lot of it comes down to communication and expectation setting. And this is something that I personally have gotten feedback and coaching on, the way that I grew up, and not to throw blame on previous experiences, but a lot of decisions were made, and then it was like, here's what we're doing, deal with it, move forward. And that's kind of the way I thought things went. And then moving over to a startup, it was different, right? People want to be involved. They want to feel valued. They want their voice heard. And the first couple changes I tried to make that were just my decision, hey, here's what it is we're rolling out, didn't go so well. I learned the hard way. And so I think looking at change and change management, a huge piece of that is, how do you get buy-in? And I had a manager who really sat me down and gave me some good feedback around this, of start to share your ideas. It doesn't have to be fully baked. You don't have to promise the world to anyone, and gather feedback, right? Get opinions, especially if you're not going to be the one doing the work, right? Oftentimes leadership is tasked with creating what that change is, right? What's the new strategy, everything else, but you're not the one, answering the customer's tickets or, going in and using that tool every single day. So you got to make sure that you're incorporating that individual contributor feedback too. And, just because you're asking for feedback doesn't mean that every single piece of feedback that you get needs to be incorporated. Again, you were in the leadership role to help manage and figure out how it all fits together. But making sure that people feel like they're part of the process is so important. And then really communicating why you're even looking at the change, right? And I think back to what we were saying earlier, the idea of automation being, hey, I'm going to become less responsible for something, or maybe I'll be out of a job because you're going to automate it away. And really detailing, hey, we want to lean into, this new tool because it's going to unlock X, Y, and Z for us. Maybe it'll improve our efficiency so you can actually talk with more customers, solve more problems. It's going to allow us to scale. Those are exciting things. And I would say, especially at a startup where maybe you do have skin in the game in terms of equity within the company, your direct work is making the company grow and develop, and being able to automate and help drive some of that scale, that should be exciting if someone's really in that kind of startup mentality.
Yeah. And when you think about that sort of positioning for automation, one thing that's interesting about what you just said is that you kind of, whether you did it consciously or not, didn't necessarily make that about customer success necessarily. That's more of it was universal to kind of regardless of the function inside the business. Mm-hmm. It's going to be interesting for business leaders going forward, because it's one thing to automate something. I'll just draw from pertinent and sort of low-hanging fruit example in our space, like putting a chatbot on the website, for example, that uses AI to answer customer questions. That's a fairly pretty common use case for NLP right now, right? I can, mm-hmm. You can find a bunch of, if you just want a chatbot to put on a website, there's a bunch of options. I'd steer everyone towards capacity, but there's a bunch of options. However, we're getting into really interesting use cases now where you've got, a great example of this is a company called Drishti, that basically what they do is they install cameras at varying stages of a manufacturing process. And the camera is just basically films that stage of the process, and then the software is trained on, this is what this assembly stage should look like. This is the, these are the components, and this is the order that they all go in, and the model sort of learns, shift 1 in plant A performs stage 3 5% faster than shift 2 in plant B. Why is this? Figures out the answer and reports that onto whoever's looking at those reports, right? Like that's a much deeper level of automation inside of a business process than sort of light touch answering questions with a chatbot on the website. Not to say that answering questions can't get deeper. It most certainly can. But when you start getting into things like process automation within a business, or using AI to screen resumes, which has a whole other ball of potential problems with it, like you're dealing with much deeper sort of implications. So my question then, when you've got those sort of heavier expectations of what automation potentially means, you're ending up kind of having much deeper discussion with the vendors and the tools that you're bringing in, because again, you're not just like, I need something to send my emails. Well, you're buying something much deeper than that now, and you're looking at that evaluation. Like, what advice do you have for people in your position who are doing that evaluation? Like, what kind of questions do you recommend asking? Maybe if you have a specific example of an experience that went well or poorly with that evaluation to share would also be great. That was a really long way of saying what goes into evaluating tools for automation.
It's an important decision. One thing that I like to try and remind myself of when I'm asking for budget is, I have my lens of the world, right? I'm asking for budget for, another person or a tool, but our finance team is getting that question from every organization at the company. Mm-hmm. So, and they have to then make decisions and prioritize. So you've got to be really clear on, why am I asking for this and what's the benefit going to be? And I think it's really easy when you get to a certain point, you say, okay, we need a tool, right? It's time to invest. Here's a piece that we can automate through this. We're going to become more efficient, to just start hopping on calls with vendors. It's fun to get a demo. You get to see the shiny UI. You can imagine like these glorious, future you self, all the benefits of that. Maybe you even get invited to, a vendor happy hour or whatever it is, however you like to shop for tools. But I think the problem with that is you get kind of overwhelmed in the dazzle, and then it becomes a little bit harder to actually make an effective decision. So one of the things that I've found really helpful is, before I talk with anyone, is making sure I really understand the problem that we're trying to solve, right? Why are we buying this tool? And then outlining what is the criteria that I'm going to make the decision on. Before I even talk to anyone and get any sort of influence from an outside vendor, what's important to me? Are there certain features or functionalities? Does it need to work with certain tools that we already have? Are there reports that I want to be able to see, some sort of data visibility coming out of it? So that way I can go in and actually start evaluating off of the criteria that I need for my business, rather than, whatever key things that the vendor wants to tell me about them. Some of that's great. Maybe it's the cherry on top, but being really clear about what do I need for this tool to be most effective? I'm spending, thousands, potentially even more dollars in investing in this. You've got to make sure that at the end of the day, you've kind of checked all of those boxes that are going to be critical to making it most effective.
Yeah, it's exactly right, because every customer is a little different. And you know this at Fastly, right? Like, no two are exactly the same. Like, they can get cohorted and bucketed, and that's why you build the tiers of feature sets, or however your SaaS product in this example is sold. But ultimately, like, there is a lot of variance inside of there. And one of the things that I always recommend people do, and this sounds almost kind of crazy coming from someone who's like, paid and incentivized to sell automation, but like, really map out this sort of like, get some flowchart software, whichever one sort of makes you happy, and map out the process that you're looking to automate in the first place. And you find occasionally that you don't necessarily even need to automate the process. You just need to like fix the process itself. You know what I mean? Like you when you map it out and you're like, okay, this data comes in from this tool and then we send it off to this tool to get this thing back to then do this, et cetera, et cetera. And then this team comes in, you're like, oh shit, we can optimize this simply by removing X and then combining Y and Z together, and boom, you've saved a huge portion of what you're trying to do. But I think you touched on something really interesting, and that is support leaders, kind of like all revenue facing functions of a business face this issue. I think some more so than others, but you end up getting jealous of, other organizations who have something really slick, and you get the FOMO, if you will, and that drives you. Next thing you know, you're signing a contract for an application that you don't necessarily need. So I think you're exactly right. Like, find the way you need this particular application to work, and all your questions and all your evaluation needs to go off of that.
I love the point that you were making, and I'll just maybe say it a slightly different way, but sometimes you don't need to buy a tool, right? Like, there's the excitement of it, but one of the things that our business systems team at Fastly has been so great at in partnering is actually pushing back a little bit, right? Like, do you need that tool? But also asking the question, do we already have a tool that would work, right? There's oftentimes this excitement around buying something new, but maybe, I don't know, say you're trying to do a customer satisfaction survey. Do you need a survey tool, or can you use, the Zendesk survey if you already are using Zendesk for ticketing? So I think sometimes we forget about the other functionalities of tools that we already have and just want to go spend more money. But then, your company grows and scales, and 5 years later, you're like, why do we have 5 things that do the same thing? And you have to go back and re-streamline.
Yeah. In marketing, that's always the thing that I tell people is like, evaluate your tech stack like once every 6 months. And if you ever find that you have more than 3 different tools to send an email to somebody, it's time to it's time to rethink. And part of it's, kind of guilt. We're all selling software here. We can kind of be guilty as charged. Sometimes you end up like vendors add on features because they're looking for expansion revenue and, different ways to sort of grow the business. And, you can't fault people for doing that. But the natural byproduct of that is you end up with 4 different tools that will email a customer if you needed to.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So one thing, I always love asking people that come on this show is there a specific automation that you've seen brought into Fastly that had a particularly powerful impact and that you would recommend maybe someone else in your position look into doing? And you don't have to mention the specific vendor if you don't want, but just even if it's like a part of the function that you were able to bring automation that was particularly successful. Yeah.
So I'll say, I'm going to talk about it at a little bit higher level just because I wasn't really running that project, but actually using, it's called Frame AI, and it's been able to really give just visibility and analytics around tickets, right? What understanding, through NLP and things like that, is this a happy ticket? Is this a mad ticket? In mad tickets, what are they, what are the top concerns? What types of questions come in more often, right? And I think just any tool that can give you some of that visibility into both, customer health and sentiment, because then you can go filter that back to the appropriate teams. Maybe that's customer success, maybe that's sales, right? It's back to that idea of how do we share information and become valuable as internal partners. But then it also gives you the ability to become more efficient in other ways. So say you start to see a pattern of, hey, at 2 months, we tend to get, they've purchased our product, they're 2 months in, and we tend to get questions about X. Okay, if we're starting to see that as a trend, then can we build documentation around that Maybe it's video training, whatever it is to help support the question and actually then be more proactive rather than reactive and, waiting for the ticket to come to support. How about we say, hey, you're approaching your 2-month mark. People are typically running into this challenge or have this question. If this fits your scenario, great, here's the answer. We'll give it to you now. That's some of the power of automation. It's not, hey, we want to take stuff away from support. But if you're self-servicing a little bit customers on some of those more common things, it actually allows the support or other teams to become more strategic, right? Get into more of the more challenging things.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to answer the same question day in and day out. That's not as fun. So being able to really use a tool to identify some of that data and trends will actually allow the team to kind of shift where its time is focused.
That's fantastic stuff, Emily. And first off, shout out to our friends at Frame.ai. Very familiar with them. The idea of leveraging technology to do sentiment analysis, I'm going to overly simplify this. Any folks in marketing over at Frame that take issue with this, find me on Twitter. but using AI to do sentiment analysis at scale is fantastic because that gets into one of my credences in life, which is the plural of anecdote is not data, right? So when you get people come oh, XYZ is broken, it's well, why do you say that? Well, I had a phone call with so-and-so. It's okay, you had one call? Okay. But leveraging technology like that to sort of look at, hundreds or thousands of requests or whatever it is and kind of come down to what the actual issues is extremely powerful. The other thing you touched on that was music to my ears, and this is something we say all the time here at Capacity. In fact, it's literally on the wall in our now mostly empty because we're all remote office here in St. Louis, is helping teams do their best work, which is exactly what you described in that a good automation can eliminate a lot of the repetitive tasks that people do and free your best people up to do their best work. It's not about I'm going to bring in some tool and I'm going to replace 500 people in my organization. I'm going to bring in some tool and the people in these 500 people in my organization are now no longer going to have to deal with, I'm going to be extremely reductive here, answering the phone and saying our business hours are 9 to 5 anymore, right? We're going to be able to free these people up for higher level things. Absolutely love it. Kind of wrapping up our conversation here, what excites you the most about the future of automation and customer success?
I think it's really around being able to dive in and be a little more personalized with the customer. If we can leverage automation for some of those more basic tasks and kind of provide a baseline across all of our customers for that customer experience, it then allows, whether it's support or customer success, to have deeper and more fruitful conversations with our customer. If you're leveraging tooling and automation to make sure that you're tracking, customer specific information, right? So, hey, our customer success team knows that, you're hosting an AWS. Great. They can put that in, your, whatever your repository looks like. Now, when the support team is helping solve a ticket, that's one less question that they have to ask. And so now you can say, great, I understand that you're using AWS. Maybe it's asking, that level 2 or level 3 question to help solve something faster. But I think just being as personalized to the customer, it's always a balance, right? Because personalization doesn't scale. It's hard. But if you can find some of that balance where you're not starting at ground zero each time and you can use tooling to help that, it's just a better customer experience. I think it's a more engaging job function because you're having real conversations with customers.
Yes, love it. Emily, this has been a fantastic conversation. Let's end with longtime listeners of the show always, I've honest to God gotten LinkedIn messages about this. I've still not branded the final quickfire round. And almost every show I make an awkward reference to the fact that I have not branded it, which is now becoming the brand in and of itself. Maybe I'm more of a marketing genius than I let on here. But kidding aside, let's end with our quick fire round here. So just sort of first thing that comes to mind, what's the book you most often recommend to people?
Oh, I'll go with Genius Habit. And I'm going to have to look up who the author is because I don't remember off the top of my head. But it was recommended to me as I was really trying to figure out what do I want to do in my career. And you got to do the exercises. You can't just read the book.
Laura Garnett?
But if that sounds correct.
Yeah. Yeah, the Genius Habit.
Yeah. So you go through and it really helps you focus on what do I like doing? What am I good at doing? And how do I marry those two?
Yep. Yeah. It's like the Japanese concept of ikigai, where like, what are people good at doing? Like, what do people like doing? And then like, what can you pay people for? And then like the intersection of that is like the ultimate like hire that you can make. The Genius Habit. Yeah, that's a good one. That you were the first person to recommend that book, but I have heard of this book before. So that's a good one. Next up is if you could recommend one website, blog, Slack community, LinkedIn, Facebook group, etc., for people in customer success or customer success adjacent, what would it be?
Can I say mine?
Of course. Absolutely can.
So yeah, very shameless plug. This year I launched Value CS with Emily. So it's www.valuecswithemily.com. And it's really a collection of, various podcasts that I've done. So just conversations around customer success, some things that I've published on LinkedIn. Usually about 2 times a week, I'll share some sort of infographic with, different customer success related topics. But it's also where, it's not 100% about me. It's also where I highlight really interesting blogs and podcasts and other, people that I find interesting in the CS space. So it's really my hub of CS learning.
Yeah. ValueCSWithEmily.com. I'm on it right now. And yeah, this is fantastic. You've got a lot of great stuff on here.
It's been my COVID project.
My COVID project was turning this sunroom into the office that it is now.
Nice.
Next question. If you look back on all your years in management and being a productive, high contributing individual, and just you look back at all the different, your journey through school and work and everything else. If you could think of one productivity tip, productivity hack, if you want to call it that you've heard that stuck with you, what is it?
I don't know if it's a hack.
Yeah,
but I would say,
I hate saying productivity hacks, but
I would say one thing that has helped with my productivity is getting notes down as soon as possible after a meeting. So I'm not the type of person who likes to record meetings and then go back and listen to them because I don't have time.
No.
Like I've been through it once. I don't need to be through
0% chance of me listening to a recorded meeting.
And so, being able to leave the meeting, and I typically like handwriting notes, transcribing those, into a more cohesive form for other people to read. But if you do it, the sooner after the meeting, the more context you have, right?
Yeah.
If you try and do it 3-4 days later, like, what did that word mean? What was I trying to remember? And so for me, it's just being able to prioritize that time after a meeting to make sure that I really absorb it and document it in a way that I can take action in the future.
Yeah, that's a great one. Personally, one thing I did about 3 or 4 months ago is, this is a little convoluted, but I have a Zapier integration that I set up that whenever I have a meeting on my calendar, it creates a note in Notion with that meeting and like all the metadata from the meeting. So like who attended, what was the title, et cetera, et cetera. And it creates a blank note that then I have open. I usually take notes on my iPad with a pencil, and then I like translate that into text and shove it in rather than like sit there on my mechanical keyboard that's really clacky. But yes, taking notes, I say this to say taking notes for a meeting and doing it immediately after is an extremely good idea. All right, last one. Who in the world of customer success would you take out for either a coffee or a cocktail, depending on the time of day? And who would that be?
So I'll say Success Hacker just published a list of top 25 customer success influencers and top 100 customer success strategists. And that, I would say, only scratches the surface. Like the customer success world is just growing by leaps and bounds at this point. There's so many people. But I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably say Nick Mehta, who's the CEO of Gainsight. He has done such a good job in connecting with so many customers. Gainsight has many customers and was really the first to market in terms of the CS tooling space. And I'd love to just hear his perspective in being able to talk to so many, right? He would kind of be that resource to level up and share the analysis and trends that he sees across the industry.
Shout out to Nick at Gainsight, a company that was founded here in St. Louis. Yeah, they still have an office here, but yeah, that's one of our success stories. Thank you so much, Emily, for coming on our show and speaking with me. I'm sure you've got a very busy day, and taking some time out to chat about support automation and customer success has been a real treat for me. Emily, where can people find out more about you and Fastly?
Sure. So Fastly, I would say our website, fastly.com, is probably our primary source of communication. And then for me personally, connect with me on LinkedIn, Emily Garza, or come to my website, valuecswithemily.com.
Love it. Emily Garza, thank you so much for being on the Support Automation Show.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Support Automation Show is brought to you by Capacity. Visit capacity.com to find everything you need for automating support and business processes in one powerful platform. You can find the show by searching for Support Automation in your favorite podcast app. Please subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Capacity, thanks for listening.